Hey guys, my name is Toby and welcome back to another exciting Photoshop tutorial where today we're going to be talking about this image here. Now this is something that I put on my blog and Facebook page a couple of months ago and I've had quite a lot of interest in it, including a number of people who've asked me how I actually went about doing it. And had all sorts of interesting hypotheses come up. Things like, did I use a firework? And things like that. In fact, the truth about how we did this is much simpler. Basically, we had this jar of Smarties, and inside of it, I don't know if you can see just there, there's actually a big rubber ball that I wasn't able to Photoshop out. And all we did was throw the ball into the Smarties. Now, the thing is, to get this kind of even spread like this, it doesn't really happen naturally like that, unfortunately. It is very much a case of something that we had to kind of engineer, if you like. So what we actually ended up doing was taking multiple shots with this kind of scattering and then putting them all together to give this kind of shape, which you're just not going to, I suppose there's a chance you could get it in real life, but it's just very unlikely. So anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at how we actually went about putting this together in Photoshop. So the best way to start with any kind of comp that's going to have these multiple shots of the same thing all layered up is to go to File, Scripts, and then you want to go to Load Files into Stack. And this is a very useful little command because what this will let you do is kind of automatically create a layered document. So if you go to Browse, I'm just going to select these images here, which are conveniently already open for me, and click Open. And then what I would normally do with this kind of composite is I would click Attempt to automatically align source images. And, well, more or less every single time that works awesomely, except for some reason in this particular image where it didn't. Basically what this command does is it will look for it analyzes each picture and looks for similar features, and then it will attempt to line them up for you so that you don't have to do it, which is such a huge time saver. And it generally does a very good job, but for whatever reason, in this particular set of images, it didn't work. I imagine it is something to do with the fact that you might have like two red Smarties and it's going to identify both of those, but there might be two red Smarties in a different picture that are really far apart, but it's going, well, they're two red Smarties, and then it's skewing the image horribly to try and get those to line up, and it doesn't look good. So we're actually going to have to do this bit manually, but generally speaking, as a little compositing tip, that is how I would do this normally. So I'm going to hit OK. And so even though it's not going to line them up for us, it's still a very useful command because it's going to save us a lot of time in adding all of these photos into one single image. So it's created a nice layered document for us now. And what we're going to do is this top one here, the sort of the blank one, is going to be our base image. This is the shot that we're going to add everything to. So I'm going to drag this to the very bottom of our stack. And as you can see, we've kind of got the rest of these images here. Now, what we ended up doing is we had to throw the ball in from several different angles. So when we threw it this way, the Smarties went that way. When we threw it this way, the Smarties went that way, and so on and so forth. And that's kind of how we managed to get that nice spread. So when I was selecting these, I was going, right, so this shot has some nice ones going to the left, and then this shot has some that's going to the right. This one has some nice in the middle that are going to be useful. And that's kind of what I was looking for when I was picking the shots that we're going to use for this. So, first things first, we need to line up our images. And I've got everything turned off except for the bottom two layers. Now, we're going to try and line everything up with our blank one, our clean plate, if you like. So, might just go ahead and call that clean plate. There we go. And we're going to take the next layer up. And the best way to line these sort of things up, by the way, is to turn the opacity of the top layer down so you can kind of see what you're lining it up with rather than guessing. And there's a couple of good ways to do that. You can either play with kind of this slider here, but I prefer the keyboard shortcut, which is much easier to use. If you are on the Move tool, and I will stress that's important, because if you're on the Brush tool, it will actually change the opacity of your brush, or anything else like that. if you're on the Move tool with your layer selected, if you tap number keys, it will change your opacity. So if I hit 3, for instance, it will go to 30%. If I hit 82 very quickly, it will go to 82. If I just hit 8 and then 2, it's going to go to 80 and 20. If you go to 0, it will go back to 100%. If you double tap 0, it goes to 0. But we actually want 50%, so I'm going to hit 5. And now we kind of have a 50% transparent second layer. And what we need to do is, because this here is the area we're interested in, we need to line up this side of the jar. Now, another problem I think Align Stack automatically may have come up against is the fact that as we were throwing this ball in, the jar did move slightly. Remember that we did this a couple of hundred times, so it's gonna knock things around a little bit. So I think that might have not really helped matters. But anyway, we're really only interested in lining up this area here because we don't really care about the left side of the jar for this image. So I'm just gonna come in here and get that looking pretty good. Yeah, that's good enough for what we're doing. Okay, I'm going to come up to the next one. I'm going to turn off this layer here, turn this back on. And for this one, we obviously want the left side. So that's where I'm going to focus. I'm going to hit 5 on the keyboard to bring that down to 50% opacity. I'm just going to kind of come in here and line that up. If you use the arrow keys, you can kind of nudge it a little bit more precisely than trying to do it with the mouse. And let's bring that back up to 100% by pressing 0. And you can kind of see in this one how it has kind of rotated a little bit, so it has moved slightly, but it's not enough that it's going to be a problem for us, I don't think. Let's just do these last two very quickly. This one is coming from the middle, so we kind of want the middle to be a focus. And again, it doesn't have to be too precise. That's pretty good. There we go. If you just turn it on and off, you can kind of see how much it's moving. But I'm looking at this bit here and how this lip lines up. So if the bottom moves or the lid moves or something like that, I'm not really going to worry about it. So that's fine. And we'll do the same with this one. This one is kind of, it's kind of this area, I guess. So I'm going to bring down to 50%. I'm going to drag this over. Let's just try and line up this bit, I suppose. And voila. Right. So now we have all of our images. I'm going to turn off everything except for the bottom one and the one above it. Now, we're only really interested in this bit here. What we don't want is we don't want the floor. We actually want the ground underneath the jar to remain kind of clear, so it looks like we've captured this as it's happening rather than as they're starting to come back down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my lasso tool. I'm going to draw around, kind of just very loosely, this area here. There we go. In fact, I may even, by holding Alt, I'm just going to remove this bit here because I don't actually want them touching the lid of the jar, I've decided just now. We'll just add that bit back in. Oh, too much. There we go. Okay. So we have a selection, and now that we have a selection, we can turn that into a mask very easily just by, with the layer we want to apply it to selected, we click the mask icon and it's going to automatically create a mask of that portion of the image. I'm going to go up to the next one, turn that on, and this one we kind of just want some of these ones that are going over to the left and maybe some of the ones up the top as well. So I'm going to do the same thing again, lasso tool. Just going to kind of quickly draw around some of this. Just make sure I haven't lopped anything off that I didn't mean to. That's going to be okay. I'm going to click the mask button again, and it's going to add a mask for us. Yep, I think that's more or less going to be okay. What I might do is just take our brush tool with this one, put this on a soft brush, and just make sure that the jar kind of looks normal. because we've got that hard edge from our selection. It's kind of doing some weird things, which we don't necessarily want it to. Let's put the next one in and see what that does. This one. So this one actually you want kind of the top of the jar here. So we're going to make sure we get all of that and just kind of, hold shift to add to that selection. Just kind of add in a bunch of stuff. There we go. And you know, you can actually sit here and you can hand pick out the Smarties that you want to include. You know, some of them might be preferable over others. I'm going to add a mask. There we go. Okay, and then we'll just go for this top one. So maybe we'll just have a few down here. So I might just take those ones. And we'll just add a mask. There we go. Okay, so now it's just a case of, with the brush tool, you want to use probably quite a hard brush, but not too hard. Just kind of going around and making sure that you've got all the bits that you want kind of added. And you know, you can be really, really picky at this point. So let's think that one. Let's add that. Let's add a few of these. We don't want that one or that bit there. You know, I'm not going to spend too long on this, just because, in the interest of time. But you know, you can do quite a lot. Well, now what some of you may notice, there's quite a hard edge around where we've made some of these selections, and the reason you're seeing that difference is because as we were moving around the jar to kind of throw the ball in from different angles, what's happened is that either whoever's throwing the ball has stood in front of a light a little bit, or it's just by being in a different part of the room, it's changed how the light has kind of bounced around, and that can be enough to create these sort of slight tonal differences that you're seeing. But don't worry about those for now, because we're going to deal with those in just a minute. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good. So you could spend more time on this. I'm just going to kind of quickly, roughly do this, so it's not the end of the world. Okay, so we have our Smarties now. It's not quite as neat as the original. I did spend a lot longer on that, to be fair, but you kind of get the idea of how you might do this, and you can hand pick which bits you want and don't want. So I've just kind of done this very roughly. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to duplicate our clean plate. I'm going to drag this up to the top, and I'm going to turn it off. And then what I want to do is I want to create a stamp visible layer of kind of all of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Command, Alt, Shift, and then E. And then what that's going to do is everything that it can see, it's going to kind of create a merged layer of that. So if I turn this on and off, you're not going to see a difference, because it's effectively the same thing as if we flattened the image and then duplicated it, except that we keep all our layers by doing it this way. So now what I'm going to do is, because we don't really need all of this anymore, is I'm just going to take these, I'll put them in a group, and we'll just call this masking, and we can turn that off for now. So now we have our merged layer with clean paint copy. And what we're going to do is we're going to now deal with the kind of blue tone differences that we have. So in our clean background, we kind of don't really have that. We've got quite a nice general blue going on. So that's kind of what we want behind our Smarties. And fortunately, we can kind of use this like a green screen effectively, or a blue screen, as you may have heard that referred to. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually select the blue background out from everything else. And we're going to use that to create a mask. So the way we do that is we're going to go to Select and then Color Range. and bring up this dialog box here. And what we can do is if you kind of click around the image, you can select certain colors. So, you know, that is going to select, if we select like the reds, let's say, and then you can kind of see, if I zoom in here, that it's starting to select all the red Smarties. Now what we want to do is we want to actually just select the background. So I'm just going to zoom out here, and I'm just going to kind of click, and then if you hold shift you can kind of click and drag and just add areas into your selection. Now what you might start to see is that some of the Smarties are getting selected too, and that is because we do have some blue Smarties, but fortunately there's not too many of them, so I think we can probably get away with that. So that is looking pretty good, with the exception of the blue ones that have been grabbed. I'm going to click OK. And then with the lasso tool, I'm just going to have to come in here, and I think that got a bit selected as well. We're just going to have to manually come in, and holding Alt, we're just going to deselect the blue Smarties, because we do still want those to be part of our image. Okay, we'll just get rid of that one. Okie doke. And you know, you could spend quite a long time doing this and making it neat. I'm just going to kind of rush through this. It doesn't matter if you spill a little bit onto the background, because effectively we're going to be replacing a blue background with a blue background around a blue Smartie. So you're probably not going to really see it too much, I don't think. Let's just go around that one. There we go. We'll just make sure that, because it has selected some of the jar as well, I'm just going to kind of quickly whiz around in here. Just make sure none of that is selected. We'll get that blue Smartie in as well. Okay. Get that one. And again, you know, I'm just kind of doing this really roughly. You could spend a lot more time doing it than I am. We want that one. Oops. Just undo. L for lasso. I think that's more or less all of them now, isn't it? Oh no, there's one there we didn't do. See, if I'd had the forethought when I was doing this to remove all of the blue Smarties, that may have been preferable than doing it this way, but it would have been, I think, work either way, so I'm not too worried. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. I think it's just one more here, and then we're done. And voila, that's good enough. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to use this selection to create a mask for this layer. So I'm going to turn this layer on. I'm going to create a mask, and then what you're going to see is that this layer is effectively now just adding a background, and it's going to get rid of all these kind of big tonal differences, because what we have is this is what this top layer looks like, and it doesn't matter too much that we've got some transparency there, because the underneath of that area is just more blue background, so that kind of works, and that's all fine. The only other thing that I quite like to get rid of in this image is got some vignetting going on, and the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to add a new layer. I'm going to take the clone stamp tool, and I'm going to sample from kind of there. I'm just going to paint up there, and we've accidentally added a little Smartie in, so I'm just going to make the brush a bit smaller, hold Alt, paint over that. We'll do the same thing on this side. I'm going to hold Alt to sample, and then just kind of, paint out this corner. And that is our vignetting dealt with. And the only other thing that you might want to sit and spend a bit of time doing with this image is if I create another new layer, so we'll call that vignette removal, and we'll call this cleaning up, is some of the images or some of the Smarties even, have chips and things like that. So it might be a case of you might just want to not include that at all. It might be that what you could actually do, if I bring my cloning brush out, is we could take the clone stamp tool and we could invert the cloning and do something a bit like that, maybe. That's not great, is it? Maybe what we'll do then is we'll just replace that completely. And let's think. So I noticed there were a few little bits just kind of around, which you could get rid of with the spot healing brush. That would do a pretty good job, I think, for most of these. And it's kind of now a case of as much tidying up as you want to do. For instance, on this jar, if you want to make this jar look perfect, you get rid of any little imperfections in the rubber and that sort of thing. So you could go into that level of detail. I know I did when I did the original composite, but I think in the interest of time, I'm just going to kind of have a quick little go at fixing some of this. And yeah, it's looking all right. You know, you could spend a very long time doing this. So for instance, like that little bit there is quite annoying. Boop. Oh, boop. There we go. And yeah, I think that is more or less going to do it now. So if I just zoom back out, make this full screen. How did we do versus our original? It's not far off. I think this one's a bit more refined. Again, I spent a very long time kind of getting the pattern right with the spread of these. But I think that is going to do it this time, guys. So thank you very much for watching. My name is Toby, and we'll see you next time.